Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Zonta Says Now Intercontinental think tank. My name is Carol Theobald, and today's session is hosted by members of the Zonta Says Now International Working Group that I have the privilege to lead. I'm hosting this session from Australia and will be joined by Angela in the USA, Karen and Jutta in Germany, Joan in Uganda, Eric in India, Hasna in Bangladesh, and Cheryl also in Australia. Climate change affects everyone, but women are disproportionately impacted. Women are on the front lines of droughts, floods, energy shortages, and food insecurity. Yet many are excluded from the very decisions that shape policy, resources, and recovery. Today, we'll explore how we can transform climate action by having women as leaders and decision makers for sustainable change. But first, let's do some housekeeping. Please use the chat line to ask questions and make comments. Use welcoming and inclusive language, ask short, succinct questions, and answer questions or comments respectfully. Our meeting is recorded, but the discussion in the breakout rooms is not in the final video. I'll now hand over to Eric in India to take us to the next step. Eric.
Thank you, Carol. A warm welcome to everyone. We want to spend 10 minutes providing the context for today's session. First, why does Zonta says now to gender equal climate action? We use this train to join the dots. Increased carbon pollution has led to global heating that triggers extreme weather events that cause millions of people to lose their livelihoods and homes. This social disruption magnifies any existing inequality, including gender inequality. Zonta says now stops this train by advocating for governments to meet their obligations under the Paris Agreement and closing the gender gaps in decision-making, education, economic opportunity, disaster preparedness, health, and safety, as detailed in our statement on climate change. Life for women and girls at the end of the train is hard. These personas highlight the problems of the women who inspire us to take action with Zonta says now. Because of drought, girls like Dabor in Sudan walk further each day to collect water and have no time to go to school. And in Mozambique, Ayan's family lost everything in the floods, and she is being sold into marriage. In Canada, wildfire smoke triggered a young Claire's asthma. Her mother, Judith, may lose a job as she cares for Claire. And in Australia, Maria's heart condition is made worse in extreme heat. She cannot afford air conditioning, so she must walk to the local library to sit in the cool. Freya in Germany, a flood destroyed her home. She has a low-paying job, no savings, and has been in a temporary shelter for 2 years. And for Flora in Vanuatu, sea level rises and cyclones destroyed crops and fuel gender-based violence at home. It is sobering to realize that if we don't act now, there could be 1.2 billion climate refugees by 2050. Imagine the disruption, poverty, and violence. Zonta says now seeks climate justice for women and girls so that they can prevent, prepare for, respond to, and recover from the impacts of climate change on the same basis as men. At its heart, sustainable change is all about implementing the Sustainable Development Goals. Today, we will focus on how we can empower women as leaders and decision makers for sustainable change. This short video shows the importance of gender equality in decision making. The video is a few years old, but the issues are the same. Here is the video.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you. I'll now hand over to Cheryl from Australia to give us the latest facts. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. These are the latest facts around women and decision making. Around a quarter of parliamentarians and a third of national climate negotiators worldwide are women. Most of the world's illiterate people are women, and the digital gender divide limits women's access to STEM careers. Women spend so much time in unpaid work, unpaid care and domestic work, that this restricts their ability to pursue learning and leadership opportunities. When it comes to economics, a third of the clean energy workforce is women. Yet less than 4% of global climate finance supports gender equality initiatives. Research shows that closing gender gaps could increase global GDP by 6%. Countries with more women in government adopt stronger climate and sustainability policies. And let's not forget that women control over $31.8 trillion in spending and influence 70 to 80% of consumer decisions with a stronger focus on sustainable consumption. Before we go any further, we want to hear from you. In our poll today, the question is, in your club, what are some of the challenges to members engaging with Zonta Says Now? Please choose one option from these 5 responses. We are already taking action. Climate justice is not an issue in our area. We don't know what to do with Zonta Says Now. Zonta Says Now is another international campaign, but we don't have the time or resources to do it. Or other, please share in the chat. It seems that most of on the call tonight are already taking action with Zonta Says Now. I'll hand you over to Karen in Germany.
Thank you so much. We need to understand the global context we are working in today. Climate change is becoming a major economic issue. In the past decade, extreme weather events have already caused more than $2 trillion in economic losses worldwide. if current trends continue, climate-related damages could reach several trillion dollars per year by mid-century. For example, in Germany, climate damages could reach around 800 billion euros by 2050. But at the same time, research shows that investments in renewables and sustainable systems can generate significant economic benefits and employment. The key question is not only how to reduce emissions, but how societies make the economic and political decisions that shape climate action. Climate action is evolving, and international climate cooperation now operates on three interconnected levels. First, global frameworks provided by the SDGs, the Paris Agreement, and the Pact for the Future define shared goals and principles, including human rights, gender equality, and inclusive participation. Second, policies to managing transformation focus on system change, ensuring that economic and social change happens in ways that are fair and inclusive. And third, new mechanisms to address stability and climate justice use risk management to support communities facing climate impact and structural inequalities. Across all three levels, effective climate action depends on women's leadership. When participation is unequal, sustainable decision-making processes are shaped by a narrower range of perspectives. And these narrow perspectives can be seen by looking at how power, wealth, and climate impact are distributed globally. A recent Oxfam report highlights the influence of the 3,000 billionaires in the world today, and their fortunes are growing rapidly. Billionaires are 4,000 times more likely to hold political office, yet only 13% are women. Just 12 billionaires now hold more wealth than half of humanity. At the same time, the richest 10% of people produce around half of global greenhouse gas emissions, while those with the smallest carbon footprints are experiencing the harshest climate impacts. So we see a clear pattern. Those with the least responsibility for climate change often have the least power in climate decisions. This concentration of wealth and influence, largely in male hands, shapes who gets heard, whose knowledge counts, and whose futures are prioritized. Too often, wealth is used to promote fossil fuels and erode democratic processes. We have seen a significant decrease in government funding for development programs and more reliance on philanthropy. And this is the global context shaping climate decisions today: unequal power, unequal voice, and unequal impact. In this context, how can women participate more effectively in sustainable decision-making? I now hand it over to Hasna in Bangladesh. The floor is yours, Hasna.
All the facts and figures that we see quoted now, the governments of our poor countries are also using them, because this is the smart thing to do, to talk. Since the Paris Agreement and all the COP meetings, government sends representatives, so they have to be well informed. And but when they do make a speech, it doesn't reflect on the budgetary allocations. There is absolutely no special budgets on the concern of the government. And when there is fund for climate change, there is no way to monitor it. No one knows where it goes. It probably goes under development, but it should be it should highlight the plight of women who are the worst victims of climate change. And recently, there has been a lot of talk about climate justice, gender vulnerability. I'm very disturbed. I want to say that, it's not poverty. It's not just women and girl child suffering, but to the extent that now, at least in Bangladesh, minor girls as young as 9, 10 are being raped by their custodians, raped repeatedly until they become pregnant and they throw them away with a lot of threats that if you open your mouth, will I'll kill your family. And most of these are little girls, like they have no parents, or even they have parents are so poor, they give the girl to a residential school. And I made a note to Carol that I'm very disturbed. Continuously we hear and in the newspaper that girls are being impregnated, and it's inhuman. And then what happens? The culprit probably will get a sentence and he will be freed soon, but there should be exemplary punishment.
Thanks for
I'm
sharing
sorry.
that, Hasna. It just makes what we're talking about today all the more important. So when we get more women in decision-making positions, then we're able to change the system. And today, that is why we're going to look at, firstly, the why we need women's full participation in climate and sustainability decision-making. And then we'll look at the barriers, what works, and finally, we look at what Zontians can do. Research consistently shows that when women participate in decision-making, environmental and climate policies become more inclusive and sustainable. Evidence also shows that peace agreements and community resilience efforts are more durable when women are involved. And when women lead, there is stronger climate governance and more equitable resource distribution. Put simply, when women participate equally in the process, you get better policies and stronger climate outcomes. Our women in the sustainable decision-making resources show that when there are more women in political leadership, climate policies are enhanced as countries adopt stricter environmental regulations. Women leaders use inclusive decision-making, so policies and programs reflect the experiences and needs of the people. And companies with gender diverse leadership perform better on environmental, social, and governance metrics. Women drive green economic growth when they participate in renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, and the circular economy, as they champion inclusive, community-driven solutions that prioritize equity and environmental sustainability. Women are leading efforts to protect the environment in cities, towns, and remote areas, conserving water, protecting biodiversity, and building resilience to climate shocks. So women's leadership is not just fairness, it's a strategy for a sustainable future. I'll now hand over to Angela in the USA to show us what holds women back. Over to you, Angela.
Thank you, Carol. These hurdles capture the main structural barriers women face in climate decision-making. Gender stereotypes, social norms, Deeply ingrained beliefs about women's roles restrict leadership opportunities from an early age. Media, educational systems, and cultural expectations often reinforce these limits. Unpaid care work and domestic responsibilities limit opportunities, take up time and energy, and leave little space for participation. Institutional and political barriers lead to women being underrepresented in climate negotiations and in science. Tokenism, bias, weak legal protections, and gender imbalance all contribute to systematic exclusion. Women may avoid senior roles due to workplace culture, and they may lack access to powerful sponsors to advocate for them. And safety risks, from harassment to backlash, can deter women from taking on leadership roles. Women and girls have less access to STEM education, digital technology, and leadership training, particularly in low-income and rural areas. Time, poverty, and caregiving responsibilities add further obstacles. Economical barriers, such as unequal access to land, finance, and technology, limit what women can do. Women receive a tiny fraction of global climate financing, limiting their ability to lead or scale sustainable solutions. We've created 4 composite personas based on the evidence from this report. Each one represents a different place in the climate decision-making system and a different relationship to power. Let's meet them and show you what the barriers look like in practice. Meet Maria. Maria knows her land, her water, and her crops intimately, yet she cannot attend local council meetings because she spends hours each day caring for family members. She cannot enroll in training programs that would provide her farming techniques because they run during the day when she's busy. Local laws often do not recognize her rights to land, limiting her ability to influence decisions that affect her community. Amina installs solar panels in her city, but often misses professional networking events. Amina's expertise, her proposals for expanding community projects are often overlooked by male supervisors. Banks and investors are hesitant to fund her initiatives without male co-signatures, limiting her ability to scale solutions. Emily facilitates workshops and advises policymakers, but her schedule is packed with meetings and reports. Translating grassroots concerns into policy takes extra effort, and she can often face pushbacks from her colleagues who dismiss community voices as anecdotal. She also encourages subtle gender expectations, such as being expected to manage team well-being in addition to her policy work. Leela drafts climate legislation, but faces intense public scrutiny on social media, including trolling and manipulated AI contents that questions her credibility. She must carefully navigate compelling political agendas while ensuring that policies reflect the needs of rural women, urban workers, and marginalized communities. Her safety and reputation are constant concerns, and she has few mentors who understand these challenges. Please take a minute and look at these hurdles. Think about your own experiences in your community and in your work. Which of these barriers resonates with your own work from your life? Take a moment and reflect and share, please, in the chat.
How many of you have had that situation where you've been expected to look after the well-being of the team?
So many times women's roles are always the caretaker.
I think it's quite concerning that, for instance, Indigenous women, with all their knowledge, we had one. She might not be named Mariah. We have to be cautious a little bit with these things, but it's correct. They know a lot about their lands. They are really very well informed, but it's hard for them to get on the decision-making table. Brazil is a land who already reached that. That's fantastic. So the indigenous community, and especially the women, they have a say now, also in climate action, and that drives this country forward in terms of climate action, as you might notice also from the news. So that's what I'm reflecting. And from my country, we know that Germany still is far away from parity in parliaments and decision making. At the local levels, there are women if it comes to decision making in terms of climate action, but they are not in leading positions. So it's still very difficult, and we have to advocate on the local level, and that's what we do for taking that into account and to look at the women's needs. And also for having more parity in the parliaments, of course, you can organize. So, yeah.
Thank you. Well, and I so agree, Karen. Yeah, I know here in the U.S., we have such a vast landmass, and the indigenous women's inputs are just now starting to truly be recognized because the politicians can crunch numbers all day long, but unless you understand what it takes to get anything to the market, you're missing the whole point. And I think we're slowly starting to appreciate that we've got to get back to our indigenous families. We have got to get a better appreciation for how the cycles work and what's functioning, because just because you can draft it on a piece of paper doesn't mean that's the way the land's going to want to utilize it.
I just want to raise a couple of items in the chat. Teresa has said, lots of women either don't know about climate issues or what to do about them. And if they do, they're overwhelmed with all their responsibilities. It doesn't help that male leadership keeps saying climate change is a hoax. Yeah, we're always fighting misinformation. That's true. And Mita was saying, I haven't tried to put myself in a leadership position. However, I find this talk today awesome and inspiring. Thanks, Mita. That's great.
I'm going to hand it over to Cheryl in Australia to describe what works and how we can reduce the barriers and support women to lead successfully. Cheryl?
Thanks, Angela. Research shows that when women are supported to participate fully, the results are stronger, fairer, and more sustainable climate outcomes. This happens in 4 key areas. Some of the frameworks built to support gender responsive policies include CEDAW, the Convention of the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, the Sustainable Development Goals, Paris Agreement, Pact for the Future, and the Beijing Platform for Action. These all underpin women's rights to participate in sustainable decision making. When it comes to capacity building and education, training programs, mentorship, and feminist leadership development can all equip women to lead. Climate literacy and digital access are crucial tools for bridging gender gaps in sustainable decision making. Women's financial inclusion and economic empowerment are achieved by investing in women and enterprises and funding gender equitable climate outcomes, climate solutions. Gender responsive budgeting and finance mechanisms such as the Green Climate Fund are starting points. So it was pretty helpful. Finally, we can support women to work together across sectors and generations to lead change in government, corporate boards, civil society, and the courts. Many women are already leading through grassroots movements, Indigenous knowledge systems, and youth climate strategies, climate advocacy. We can create safe spaces for collaboration and engage male allies to help dismantle structural inequalities. So how do these actions work in practice? Our 4 women personas show us that progress comes from changing the systems around them. Take Maria. She already holds deep environmental knowledge about land, water, seasons, and survival. What holds her back isn't capacity, it's recognition and time. When women like Maria have secure land rights, access to local decision-making spaces, and support that reduces unpaid care work, their leadership becomes possible. Not someday, but now. Amina's story is similar, but in a different setting. She's already working in the green economy. She has skills. She's contributing solutions. But without flexible work, affordable childcare, leadership pathways, and success finance to expand her work, her progress stalls. When these supports are in place, women like Amina just don't participate. They lead innovation and scale climate solutions. Emily shows us that this looks like from inside institutions. She has access to decision makers, education, and influence. The challenge isn't entry, it's responsibility. Institutions work best when people like Emily are empowered to bring lived experience into policy. To properly fund inclusive consultation and to be accountable for those voices shape decisions. And then there's Leela. She represents women who step into political leadership knowing the risks. Online harassment, intimidation, and backlash are not side issues. They are structural barriers. Leela is able to lead when institutions step up, when there are clear rules against harassment, legal protections, and collective political backing. When institutions stay silent, women leave politics. When institutions act, women stay, and they lead. Across all four stories, the message is the same. When systems change, women's leadership is unlocked. And when women lead, climate decisions become more just, more effective, and more durable. I'll now hand over to Karen in Germany.
Thank you, Cheryl. We will now have a discussion about what we have learned so far. And in our breakout group, please, let's focus mainly on one question. What have you learned from today's session that could motivate you and your club to engage in sustainable decision making? And please remember also the story Hasna shared with us.
Close that one. All right. So we'll just get some feedback and share how we went. Group 1 was Angela, Group 2 Jutta, Group 3 Karen, and Group 4 Cheryl. So Angela, how did your conversation go? What sort of things came up?
Well, it was interesting when we first started talking about, now having the desire to step up, learn more, and how to share, and continuing to promote women in science. And the group we had one from Sweden, two from New Zealand, and then myself from the US. And at first the conversation was kind of, oh, well, that's not a real issue here. That's not a real issue here. And then the more we discussed it, it was like, oh my gosh, it's the same issue everywhere. And we got to talking about the coastlines and what happens and how do you relocate?
Yeah.
Can you relocate? How do you support the women that are in these lower coastline areas that are going to have to move? We talked about the water issues, and that tends to be an item that we don't think about. I mean, we all talk about our water tables, but until you start looking at the water lines are rising at the coast, and yet the water tables for our consumable potable water is declining, it all of a sudden you go, I guess maybe we do need to talk about this more.
Yeah, get more women in the
But
room.
just being able that, we need the diversity, we need the women in science, and we're all going to get out there and talk about it.
Good. Sounds like a plan. So how did your group go, Jutta?
Yes, I just have one which I could reach because it was muted and it didn't open the mic, or was not even possible to open the microphone. And then I have had, say, Judith from an e-club in United States. And she said they are just in, say, forming, but they are try to follow what their district is doing. So at the convention, no, on the district conference, maybe they have had some discussions and get some funding for these topics. But in their club directly, they said they don't have, say, officially from the club something, but they have, for example, a lot of gardens, so they have their own fruits and vegetables available, and they have an artist which makes upcycling of cloths. So I think it's one of good things, even if they are not, yes, spread and organized in a wider way. So it's a very excellent start for my thing. And then we have had, besides me, Eric, so we discussed a little bit about India and Germany. And we said in the beginning, yes, of course, every country thought, it's only the southern areas which have problems, maybe with climate change, but the northern or development countries not. And we agreed that every country have problems. And I said, similar in Germany, we have had floods here, really destroyed a lot of houses and complete small villages. So I think it's terrible. And also it gets hotter here in Germany because before we didn't have a need for climate air conditioners for this hotter climate, but now everyone starts getting this. And so if I compared now with India, as Eric said, it's very hot there in summer times, up to 50 degrees and humid. So I think that's really bad. And if they don't have easy water supply, so that's kind of, yes, expensive for rural areas. So they started in their club to get a kind of drain water collecting and so on. So to get the water, say, in the villages for at least farming and others for the houses. So I think it's a little bit different in the countries how they react, but I think we see you have it all over the world, the problems with the climate change.
Yeah. And how did your group go, Karen?
Oh, yeah, it was so interesting to talk to Janine Ricketts from Australia, Northern Sydney, and to Mita. And there were two other ones who unfortunately could not participate in the discussion because they were muted. But Janine told us about event they are now having together with local women leaders, actually from the federal government and from environmental institutions, to talk about climate action. And she said that it is more difficult now to transform all those actions into reality on every level. They are talking about circular economy, for instance, economy, and that's fantastic. But she said at the same time, that's what we all see and feel is that the international treaties, the international institutions we relied on, like United Nations, are losing force. That was something which was of much concern in my group. And so there's also in Australia, there's cutting of a lot of programs now, a lot of fundings, which are really important if it comes to the Pacific Islands and other things. And so we stated that there's a swing to populism. The pendulum is swinging a little bit back. It's not that as strong in Australia as in the United States, but we see that as well in Germany. The pendulum swinging back to populism and to false news and framings. And we talked about empowering our governments if it comes to corporations. We should do that on the global level, on the international level, on the local level, that we advocate for more cooperation and against this backdrop, yeah, on every level. So with the mid states, for instance, but also with the G70 states, look for cooperations just to uphold, I'm sorry, all those international treaties and the SDGs, and do that on the local level as well, and talk to and advocate with politicians and interact with politicians on the local levels to raise the awareness also about the importance of women's leadership. So that was, okay. That was the bottom line.
Brilliant.
Janine and Mita, did I forget anything?
Great, they're happy. They're happy. Okay, we'll go over to Cheryl. What did your group do, Cheryl?
We asked Hasna more about what she was talking about the problems she's very concerned about in the coastal areas of Bangladesh. And she spoke about the human rights of the girl and I guess the connections with the abuse of the girls because of the climate change to the coastal areas, the impact of the flooding, I guess the rising seas, and then that has resulted in more poverty within those coastal areas, and then because the families react with an early marriage, which is actually better for the child because of the girl, even though that is, against the human rights of the girl child, but and that was and what to do about it. And so the discussion ended with advocating within partnership with the local Zonta clubs, or what Zonta do, be advocating for the rights of the girl to the authorities, but also and to the government, but also in partnership with other community groups that would be cause of concern. So there's a swell of concern for the situation and what was happening in those coastal areas. But it was actually, Hasna said, was the impact of what was happening on the ground within those coastal areas, and it was highlighted. Or was
I mean, Hasna really is on the front lines of what happens, and Hasna really inspires us to realize why we do what we do. And I mean, she is already taking political leadership in her own country, and I think she's brilliant on what she does. So
yeah, that's true. Sorry, but before we go forward, I just wanted to add something very important from our group as well, connecting with all those things you resumed now. That's the point of the intergenerational discourse and dialogue. And that also happens in Sydney very strongly with students. And I think that also speaks a lot for our idea of having an international board as well of young Zontians, and the young Zontians in every working group, because they are really they really know what's it about. You don't have to convince them anymore. They know where we are at. And that was another point. So from here, I think we can go to Angela, and she will lead us through the last part.
Thank you, Karen. Well, here are some ideas from our Women and Sustainable Decision-Making resources. We have to remember that we are the sustainable decision makers about our own lives. So sustainable decision-making does start with us. We can use Zonta Says Now's framework for action to guide us. As individuals, we can gather the facts and read the Zonta Says Now resources and learning about Zonta's international climate empowerment projects. We can also look at how we make our own lives more sustainable by calculating our personal carbon footprint. We can lead by example by participating in Earth Day events, leading a climate justice project in our club, or supporting sustainable businesses led by women in our areas. We use our voices to create an artwork showing that we feel about how we feel about today's world and submitting it to the virtual art gallery. We can also get to know our local politicians and share our concerns for climate justice with them and on our social media accounts. If you have any other ideas, please share them in the chat line with us. We have a lot of work to do, but we can do it. And now I'll hand it over to you, Yuta, so that we can look at what we can do in our own clubs.
Okay, thanks, Angela. So what can we do in our clubs? We can brief members on the Zonta Says Now resources and learn more from organizations such as UN Women, the Women's Environment and Development Organization, WIDO, and the Women's Earth and Climate Action Network, WECAN. We can also invite local sustainability experts to club meetings to discuss local disaster preparation plans. The club can lead by example by participating in all of the Zontas awards, as they all support women's leadership, as well as Earth Day and the virtual art gallery. You may have members that are already leading in sustainability, so celebrate them. Importantly, you can role model climate leadership by reviewing your club's carbon footprint and seeing how you can integrate sustainability into your club operations. This can include holding events near public transportations, reducing printing, and using a bank with green credentials. Using your club's voice means speaking out on climate justice issues in your club's newsletter and social media, raising issues to support women's sustainable decision-making in the local newspaper and with politicians. You may find that our Young Women in Leadership awardees have something to say about climate justice, so support them by giving them a platform to share their messages. Through our personal stories, we learned how flexible work and access to childcare can all make it easier for women to attend meetings or courses. And having gender quotas and targets helps to achieve gender equality on councils and committees. It is also worth checking whether your local council uses gender-responsive budgeting, as this could help support women's lead business. Advocating on these issues can help women advance in their leadership journey. Collaboration is a way of magnifying our voice. For example, if you are hosting a climate justice event, for example, a panel discussion on climate justice fundraiser or a session on disaster preparedness, invite other Zonta clubs, E-clubs, Z-clubs, Golden Z-clubs, or like-minded local organizations or men's organizations, so you can explore issues from many perspectives. You may have other ideas to share. So which of these actions you would like to in your club to do? Please put them into the chat.
I know that our club has done Women in Science evenings, so as we can actually showcase what women scientists are doing, and they talk about what their leadership pathways are. And of course, we've got all the Zonta awards that we have, because supporting those awards is actually supporting women in leadership, young women in leadership, women in business, women in STEM. That's a good way that everything's interrelated. So that's a good way that we can support women.
Yes, you're right, Carol. We also support all three, at least, awards. So we don't have, women in aerospace, but we have, say, the Young Women in Leadership Award, and we have also the Woman in Business, as well as the Woman in STEM Award here in our club. And it's very helpful. So I get a lot of contact to this young woman, and they have a lot of ideas. So I hope that we will push this a little bit more in our, maybe growing again, Golden Set Club.
I know that from a personal level, I've been looking more to see which local businesses are owned and operated by women. And so where I can, I try and give my business to them. So it all helps to help local women's leadership by doing that. And I know in our own club, we changed banks. So as we went to one that didn't support the oil industry, the oil and gas industry, we moved to a bank that was more in support of the more green sector. So made our money work, Belle. Angela, you said that your club's working with Beyond Plastic to bring awareness of this aspect and bringing awareness to this area of climate challenges. The sad thing is, we're finding that more and more oil companies, as they're not required to, as demand for burning oil decreases over time, they're planning to use their oil for more and more plastics. And so the oil production is expected to still rise, but not so much for burning, but for making plastics. And as we heard in previous think tanks, the links between health and plastics is huge, with microplastics invading all of our bodies and things. So I encourage you to go and look at previous think tanks to have a little look at that. What we've got here, we've got, could you please share again where we do and we can stand for? That's we do is the Women's Environmental, I'm going to get it right, the Women's Environment and Development Organization is we do, and the Women's Earth and Climate Action Network is we can. And we can does an amazing, basically 3 or 4 days of online global assembly on climate justice. It's all held online, and it's sort of, I think it was 3 full days, 4 full days last year. It's about June time, but look out for it.
And Weekend is also organized with a lot of indigenous women participating there. So that's very interesting. So you learn a lot from around the globe.
Yeah. I was at Women Deliver in Melbourne last week, and it was over 6,100 women from, well, mostly women from 198 countries, all assembled in Melbourne. You were there as well, Cheryl. It was an amazing week. There were Justin Trudeau was there, Jacinda Ardern was there, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand. There was Helen Clark. There was just amazing. Julia Gillard, the first female Prime Minister of Australia. The conversations were amazing. There were so many women from the Pacific sharing their concerns of their countries literally disappearing. And what you really got was the solidarity, the women supporting women in all their diversity from across the globe was absolutely inspiring, absolutely inspiring. It was 5 full days, basically, 3 of them official days, 2 pre-conferences, from 7:30 in the morning till 9 at night. You had to be really fit for it because there was over 100 sessions, and it was just mind-blowing. Anyway, if you ever get the chance to go to a Women Deliver, I highly recommend it. They're only held every 3 years in a different part of the world. 3 years ago, it was in Rwanda, and I don't know where the next one will be yet. They haven't yet decided. So there's lots to get involved with, lots to learn from. So I encourage you to do so. I've got this one.
That's very encouraging and so important to know about that, Karen. I'm so grateful for that you have been part of that, Cheryl, as well, and share your experiences, because this gives us hope, and it shows how we can, where there are the dots or the possibilities to bring forward climate action in every country.
The really good thing was that Women Deliver, they launched the Australian Feminist Climate Collective, and Zonta hopes to be part of that in the near future. And that was 5 women's climate organisations coming together, and I think there's more actually. So in our chat line, we've got that Helen's Club's got a Science Award for post-grad women. That's great. We've spoken to the local council. They have a community program where a group can get in touch and have a planting activity. That's great. Sonia is in the virtual art. Sonia Phillips's art gallery entries are just brilliant. I always look forward to her entries. Janine, she says, we're about to present an event with women leaders in climate environment advocacy, including an independent member of the Australian Parliament elected on a strong economy, strong climate action platform. We also changed to a bank with better green credentials. Hooray, well done, Janine, that's brilliant. Now, what's Celine saying? Celine's saying which organisation? I don't know which context that's in, but we'll find out. Anki, we have a meeting with the local disaster response officer to discuss how women's issues are taken into account and how many women are involved in the committee. Brilliant, brilliant. There's some good things happening. That's great to see. So over to you, Jutta.
Okay, so next, what are some simple actions that Zontians could take to support our personas? Zontians could advocate for accessible childcare so that Maria could attend meetings. Zontians could mentor Amina, encourage her to apply for Zonta's Woman in Business Leadership Award. Zontians could contribute to public consultation processes led by Emily so that women's perspectives are heard. And Zontians could lead Laila, send her messages of support to offset the toxic media she receives, and vote on policies that support gender equality and sustainability. I'll now hand over to Carol to wrap up the session.
Thank you. Yes. Yes, Celine means which bank did we change, go to the Kerr Club change to? Janine says it was the Bendigo Bank, a community bank in Australia. Yes, we did the same. That sounds good. When we talked about Layla, we mentioned here, send her message of support to offset the toxic media she receives. When I was at Women Deliver last week, there was a really interesting interview by Julia Gillard with a lady, Ingram, I've forgotten her first name, Cheryl, who was our e-commissioner in Australia. So we recently had Julie Ingram, that's it, Julie Ingram, thank you. We had the laws changed in Australia recently so that children under 16 cannot access social media. Anyway, Elon Musk was very annoyed about this, and so he started a campaign against Julie Ingram in the social media. On one day, she received 50,000 negative comments, or 80% of them were negative comments about her, with threats to herself, her family, and she said they were just horrible. So as a result of Women Deliver, we said, right, one thing we can do is to send these women in positions that are really tricky to send them messages of support so that they're not always receiving toxic comments, that they get supported comments as well. I thought that was interesting. Anyway, thanks, Jutta. Over the course of our workshop, we've seen that when women are included, climate decisions are stronger, more just, and more resilient. We've explored the barriers that hold women back, from unpaid care work to limited legal protections, from underrepresentation in leadership to safety risks in politics and activism. We've also looked at what works, from gender-responsive policies and skills development to economic empowerment and institutional backing. Zontians have a pivotal role. Through our individual and club actions, we can lead on sustainability, amplify women's voices, advocate for equitable policies, build networks that support leadership, and help ensure safety for women leaders. The takeaway is clear. Inclusive decision-making is not a nice to have. It is essential for effective climate action, sustainable outcomes, sustainable solutions, and fair outcomes for everyone. As we wrap up, let's return to our 4 personas. They remind us that climate action is lived and experienced differently at every level. Maria shows us why local empowerment matters. Amina reminds us how support and flexible structures allow women to lead in green economy initiatives. Emily highlights the need to connect lived experience to institutional policy. And Layla demonstrates that political leadership is possible when women are protected and backed by strong legal and social safeguards. As Zontians, you have a role at every level, empowering, supporting, connecting, and protecting. Our task now is to take these lessons into our own work, networks, and advocacy. When women are leaders and decision makers for sustainable change, we can truly build a better world for women and girls. So thank you to all of our speakers today, our facilitators and participants for being part of today's think tank. Your insights, questions and engagement are what makes this dialogue meaningful and help advance women's leadership in climate decision making. To learn more about our programs, research and action on gender equal climate justice, please go to the website. And we hope to leave you inspired, informed, and ready to continue the work in your clubs and community. I'll take the screen share off so we can all see each other and say cheers. Now, if anything that anyone else wants to say, now is your time.
Yeah. No, it's so nice, and it was such a vital and very enriching conversation with all of you.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And I think we also can learn a lot. I'm still a little bit considered, I'm sorry, Carol, by Mariah. We can learn also from those indigenous communities that yes, they have other problems, not only care, that's more a problem here, but the problem of that their spaces of living are completely destroyed by industry. And they're still very threatened, also in Brazil, by fossil fuel industry as well as agrar industry. So I think that's one factor we can also look at if we are in those countries, what's happening to them there. Yeah.
How we can support our local Indigenous women around the world is huge. It's a huge issue.
Yes.
But the strength of those women is amazing. I spoke to a lady at Women Deliver from Vanuatu, and she was working with ActionAid, and she lived on an island where violence against women is normal. It's normalized. And the women don't have a say in what goes on. The men all leave home in the morning and go to the meeting house where they drink kava during the day, and they make the decisions. The women's aren't allowed in the kava house. And she was saying that when the storms come through, the cyclones come through to their islands, they didn't know what was going on because the men had the phones, the men had the radios, the women didn't. And through a project through ActionAid, they were able to communicate about the storms that came in. Vanuatu is spread over 80 islands with 140 different languages. And this lady called Flora spoke, she said, I only speak 11 of the languages. Anyway, she was saying that they managed to get all the women to work together. 10,000 women are now the early warning system for Vanuatu. So they can now listen to the radio and use mobile phones, and they don't listen to the weather reports in the same way. They reproduce them. So the meteorological office will say, we're expecting gale force winds. They interpret it and say, if this wind will blow the branches off the mango trees, or this wind will blow the metal poles down. So if we get the blowing the branches off the mango tree winds, you do this. And if it's the poles going down, you do that. And they organize boats to take people to different islands. They organize for debris to be picked up around the island so it's not blown away. They make sure everything's in order. They've got food and water collected before the things happen. And now the men can see that the women are actually making a difference. And they think, oh, they've got something to say that we can listen to. So now they're actually beginning to talk to each other. I thought, wow, what an amazing story. So I just had to share that with you as an example of how women can get into sustainable decision-making leadership positions. It's just brilliant.
Yes, and look at this screen, Carol. Look at this screen.
It's just
look at
brilliant.
all the women here, yeah, from all the
Exactly.
different continents.
Yeah, it's
So
fantastic.
imagine if we come together with our communities on local level, on global level, what we can do, yeah?
Brilliant.
A lot.
Well, anyway, on that note, thank you all very much for your time today, and thank you so much. This is actually our last Intercontinental think tank for this biennium, and so I want to thank you all for your support throughout the last 2 years. So thank you all very much. Cheerio.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carol, for your leadership.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you for your leadership,
Bye-bye.
Carol. It was amazing. Thank you.
Many thanks,
Thank you
Carol.
all.
And thank you for the fantastic team. It's a dream team, everyone.
Brilliant
Oh,
team.
it has been
Thank you all
great.
so much. Thank you.